like. In 2 Corinthians 11 and beginning with verse 12, it says, "And what I do," Paul is talking, "I will continue to do in order to undermine the claim of those who would like to claim that in their boasted mission they work on the same terms as we do. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds." Somebody can say amen to that if they want. That's scripture. I have, since I am not an expert on Islam, I am quoting things that I've studied that are good sources. But that doesn't mean that I don't want you to challenge me on any of it. You certainly may do that. Just a few things from this last year, 2015. 1,118 Somali refugees arrived directly from Africa into Minnesota. Most without family ties here. According to State Department statistics, more than 30,000 live in Minnesota. This is the nation's largest concentration of Somali immigrants. What's the source of that? The U.S. Census data. There have been warnings of attacks on the Mall of America. I don't know if you're aware of that. Just wait. I was getting a question from the audience, but we'll wait on that. Yes, I don't know how many of you heard that there have been warnings of attacks on the Mall of America. Minnesota is the closest thing in the U.S. to a true social democratic state. In other words, socialism, we're the closest to socialism in the state of Minnesota of any state in the United States, except perhaps Alaska. Somalians have been given a secure environment here. They're given housing, education, health care, and even some income to sustain them, all provided by Minnesota. And again, outside Alaska, Minnesota spends more on public welfare than any other state in America. Only 41% of Somali men are working, and only 54% of the women. So we're supporting them. In an effort to better assimilate, now listen to this, I love this statistic here. In an effort to better assimilate the refugee population and deter against Islamic recruitment efforts, Governor Dayton has expanded the state's entitlement programs and won't say how much it's costing the state. This is something that we got from the Washington Times. Amy Klobuchar, our Amy and our Al Franken, sent a letter to the Secretary of State to get more reliable money transfer services so the Somalis can more easily send money back home. They're really working for us here. The number of Somalis resettled in Minnesota has more than tripled in 4 years. And with the surge in refugees comes more of a risk to our community, and this has been quoted by radicalization experts. But you have to understand, it's not just the Somalis that are being radicalized. There's others in the state of Minnesota that are being radicalized and becoming parts of terror cells as well. From WND Faith, it says also at Lake Calhoun back in July, Somali threats of rape and violence as they went through the Lake Calhoun area. It was barely reported in the Star and Tribune. You know what Governor Dayton says about all this? If you don't like it, find another state. Radical Islamic terrorism in the Twin Cities. November 19th, this past year, U.S. District Judge Michael Davis. Anybody here know who Michael Davis is, this judge? He's probably doing more to help with the terror cells in Minnesota than anyone. U.S. District Judge Michael Davis sentenced 9 young Somali Minnesotans on terror conspiracy charges. We may not even be aware of it because we live here in Minnesota, but a long, extraordinary federal government investigation of ISIS recruitment in Minnesota is happening. There's a long, extended federal government investigation of the recruitment right here in Minnesota. There is at least one terrorist cell in Minneapolis, and it's still alive today, reports the Star Tribune. Definitely a right-wing rag. Judge Davis described the cell as being between 9 and 20 people in the terror cell. Minneapolis has been home to the nation's largest ongoing FBI investigation into terrorist recruitment for most of the last decade. And of course, it's centered on Somali Americans. The probe began when roughly 24 men and women left the U.S. and returned to Somalia to join the terror group Al-Shabaab. Judge Davis, who was a leader in trying to fight ISIS, was quoted as saying, "We don't have anything in the U.S." Now listen to this. This is from Judge Davis. He says, "We don't have anything in the U.S. and nothing in Minnesota. And it's questionable whether there's any programs around the world that are working." And that's where we're at. Today we are witnessing the largest global convergence of jihadists in history. Individuals from more than 100 countries have migrated to Syria and Iraq since 2011. Over 25,000 foreign fighters have traveled to enlist. And at least 4 men from Minnesota have been killed fighting for ISIS. Overall, more than 20 Americans suffered a similar fate. Something from the Washington Times. Islamic terror groups target Minnesota near the Twin Cities, with Minneapolis being dubbed Little Mogadishu. That's the capital of Somalia. Am I pronouncing that right? Mogadishu. That's Minneapolis, Little Mogadishu. The State Department has helped to relocate tens of thousands of refugees from war-torn Somalia to Minnesota, where they can take advantage of its most generous welfare and charity programs. See, the State Department is channeling them into Minnesota because of our great welfare. TrueNews.com. You want to check this out. ISIS makes a stand in Syria, the supposed site of an ancient Islamic prophecy where a battle here would trigger an end times apocalypse. Shirkwat is that location. 25 miles northeast of Aleppo, about 6 miles south of Syria's border with Turkey. It's one of two locations for an epic battle between invading Christians and defending Muslims, which will result in a Muslim victory and mark the beginning of the end times. ISIS named its terrorist propaganda and magazine after this settlement. See, this is their program. Three great signs for the Muslims that signal the end of time is the arrival of the final Mahdi, the 12th Imam. He is coming to slaughter all who will not worship Allah. The Quran calls them pigs and dogs. His final task would be to establish dominating kingdom of Islam. I want to finish just a few of these before I move on. This 12th Imam is their Messiah, and he will establish the final caliphate. He will destroy all enemies of Islam. This is what they believe, in a bloody global holy war. He will go from nation to nation to punish unbelievers. This army will carry black flags saying punishment. He will go to Israel and establish his rule on Temple Mount. All will worship him and all will prosper. He will make a peace agreement with the West and Israel for 7 years. This reign lasts 7 years in which he establishes Islam. He will come on a white horse, and they quote Revelation 6:1 and 2, as the rider on a white horse carrying a bow. And they say the Jews and Christians' writings were all wrong, and secret scriptures will be revealed to the Mahdi after he gets here that will validate this point of view. Irvin Baxter says Islam has over 2 billion as of 2013, 23% of the world's population. 70% of them support Sharia law. 90% support execution of apostates. It's a religion of peace. From the Blaze, Joel C. Rosenberg talks about apocalyptic Islam, radical Islam, or apocalyptic Islam. And eschatology is now motivating extremists to do the unthinkable. They believe they must annihilate Jews and Christians in order to serve their Messiah, the Mahdi, or else they will burn in the fires of hell with no escape. That's their motivation to kill us and to kill Jews. They must establish God's kingdom on earth. That's caliphate. And they believe Jesus will return as a lieutenant to the Mahdi. Breitbart confirms everything that the True News said. Stephen McDowell, the threat of Islam to liberty and Christianity, we are at war with a false religion. We are in a battle, and it's real. And they try to just tamp it down. And I believe those of us that are living in Minnesota are probably getting less information than a lot of other states, because in the national news, they don't concentrate on one state. And here in Minnesota, they're so totally against Christians and pro everything else that's evil, that Minnesota is in kind of rough shape. But I was really impressed at this last election that we came very close to a huge percentage of us, nearly half, that voted for Trump. And that's pretty amazing in being the state that we're in. How many are familiar with this particular magazine, End Times? Familiar with that? Are you familiar with that? I don't think so. It's just called End Time. End Time magazine. I've got a copy of this back in 2010. But I want to throw this out there because I want to see what you guys think of this in relationship to the scriptures. Because there was an article in here about the 4 horsemen. And there are 4 major belief systems that determine the behavior of people in the world today. 4 major belief systems. These 4 belief systems have 4 official colors by which they're identified: white, red, black, and green. Interestingly, these same 4 colors are used in the book of Revelation to foretell the 4 belief systems that will control the minds of men just before the second coming of Jesus to the earth. You've seen this one in the end time, haven't you, Bill? I'm going to highlight some of it, and then I want to hear from you guys on this, because there's certainly more than one interpretation when you come into Revelation and Zechariah. According to the End Time magazine, the red horse represents communism and socialism. Revelation 6:4 talks about power to take peace from the world, and war always follows communism. Those controlled by this red spirit will kill one another. That's why you've seen 80 million Chinese killed. Stalin killed 20 million. Murder and killing seems to follow them wherever they go. And we all know that communism is dominated by the color red. The red horse is given a great sword. And what greater military might exist than the combined power of Russia and China? That's the red horse. The black horse is capitalism. The scriptural symbol is a balance, a symbol of trade and commerce. Revelation 6:6, the stock market. Look, you can look these up. We're not going to have time to go through it today, and it says, hurt not the oil and wine. And basically what it's saying here is don't screw up the economy or you're going to lose power. In political and news circles, socialism is referred to as the red power, and democracy is referred to as the black power. The black horse is the spirit of capitalism foreseen by God 2,000 years ago. The white horse, this particular magazine thinks that the white horse is talking about Roman Catholicism as the third great belief system that's going to be out there affecting people in the end times. And almost every conflict between nations in modern history has been generated among 3 forces: communism, capitalism, and Catholicism. And white is really the color. Pope dresses in white, his helicopter is white, the jet plane is white, the Pope mobile is white. I don't know if he has a horse. White is a symbol of peace. The predominant message of Roman Catholicism is peace. Pope Paul VI, first religious leader to speak to the United Nations, in his message, lay down your arms, war no more, never again. Around the 9th century, the Pope began to wear a crown, conquering and to conquer. 4th is the green horse, and that's the one I wanted to get to, and that's Islam. There's some scriptures here that if you want to write them down or look at the video later, it's Mark 6:39, Revelation 8:7, and Revelation 9:4. Now this refers to the 4th horse as being a pale horse. And that is probably the fault of the translators, because They couldn't picture a green horse. They said it can't mean green. But you know what the word is? Chloros. Hey, that's green. Chlorophyll, I mean. The word chlorophyll means, literally in Latin, means I love green. So that's green. Now, why do we think Islam is green? Besides chloros, translators used common sense and got it wrong. The color green for Islam was first used by Muhammad himself. The flag is green. To Muslim, green means freshness of Islam. The trim on the Temple Mount is green. Businesses in Old Jerusalem trimmed in green. Mosques are lit with a green light. A sea of green is every parade or demonstration. Empire State Building lit the upper third of the building in green during Ramadan. Revelation 9:13 through 16 talks about a war that will kill 1/3 of mankind, emanating from the Euphrates River. 100% Islamic in that region. The power of Islam will be a principal participant in this coming war. At the time of this writing, the U.S. had 130,000 troops stationed along the Euphrates in Iraq. I want to say just a little bit more about this. I know this is a lot of information. The growing influence of Islam. This is by someone, the article is by Linda Sargent. You want to check that? Omar Ahmad is the head of the Council on American Islamic Relations Incorporated. Here's a quote way back in July of 1998 from Omar Ahmad. Islam isn't in America to be equal to any other faith, but to become dominant. The only reason that they're here. The Quran should be, he said, the highest authority in America, and Islam the only accepted religion on earth. September 25th, 2009, on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, at precisely 6 a.m., 50,000 of the Islamic faithful faced Mecca, prostrated themselves, and prayed to Allah. This was repeated again at 1 p.m. and at mid-afternoon, right before sunset, and 1 hour afterwards. It was the day of Islamic unity, where they prayed for the soul of America. Was this simply an exercise of religious freedom for them, or part of a systematic master plan to replace the Bible with the Quran, the cross with the crescent, and church bells with the adhan? Its chief organizer, Hassan Abdallah, is best known as the defense attorney for Muslim terrorists. Another of the organizers endorsed this sentiment: one day Islam will be victorious, Allah willing. The White House will become the Muslim house. What is the truth about Islam? What is Sharia law? And I think this question is self-explanatory. Has Islam's goal to dominate already begun? Among many rituals and archaic punishments, Sharia law calls for death to non-Muslims, say referred to as infidels, and those leaving the Muslim religion. Historically, when Muslims establish a significant population in non-Muslim countries, they begin their campaign to implement Sharia law. That's why to have Muslims who believe in Sharia law coming to the United States, their ideology is in direct contradiction to everything that we believe in America. And what What reason should we allow people in who just want to take over America rather than embrace it? It just doesn't make any sense at all. And yet, look at the number of Americans that support it. That they're so horrified by the idea of a Muslim ban, even on 4 countries, which only affects a tiny, small amount of the number of Muslims in the world. Is there going to be a political war with the Muslims? France has the largest Muslim population, 7 million out of 60 million. They had that big woman's veil controversy over there. Do you remember that? Great Britain, Muslims grew between 2004 and 2008 to a total of 2.4 million, while the Christian population in Great Britain fell by more than 2 million. So they're obviously doing pretty good in their campaign, aren't they? And that's because of immigration, higher birth rate, and conversions. They were up to 2.4 million, while the Christian population fell by more than 2 million. At least 85 Sharia courts are operating in Great Britain. 19 are not open to public scrutiny and do not publish their decisions. That's the kind of thing that they want to have begin to happen here. Plus, Sharia schools with policies beyond the scrutiny of the British government. They have Sharia schools over there. In Switzerland, it's been threatened with the use of force and jihad, if necessary, to bring them toward a Muslim nation. And in Germany, building one of Europe's largest mosques, citizens' protests fell on deaf ears, and Germany's 3 million Muslims prevailed. The Islamic threat to the United States. Page 24, I want to look at this here, if you don't mind. We got time. This is about the Islamic threat to the United States. 30 years ago, I'm just going to read a couple of highlighted spots that I highlighted. 30 years ago, November 4th, 1979, the world watched in disbelief as a group of radical Islamic students breached the security gates of the United States embassy in Tehran and captured dozens of American citizens and diplomats. The mob called themselves Imam's disciples. 444 days passed before Khomeini released the hostages on his own terms and timetable. Remember that? Khomeini instructed his followers, Islam makes it incumbent on all adult males, provided they are not disabled or incapacitated, to prepare themselves for the conquest of countries so that the writ of Islam is obeyed in every country in the world. Those who study Islamic holy war will understand why Islam wants to conquer the whole world. America was attacked again 3 decades later on September 11, 2001. Citizens took comfort in the belief that this nation was invincible and immune from a terrorist attack on American soil. But look what happened. Even so, no one wanted to believe that such a horrific act in any way was associated with a religious calling. President George Bush was careful to clarify that the United States was not at war with Muslims. There were quick reassurances by the Muslim community that Islam was a religion of peace, even though virtually all terrorist acts worldwide were being committed by Muslims. In California public schools, students must memorize and recite Islamic prayers and verses from the Quran. They adopt Islamic names, fast for a day to experience Ramadan, and incorporate the Arabic phrase, Allahu Akbar, God is great in Arabic, into their reports. The same proclamation that suicide bombers and terrorists shout prior to detonating their bombs or opening fire on innocent victims. Then it talks about the tragic scene at Fort Hood and how Islamic terrorists can inflate the infiltrate the military. How many members of the armed forces openly identify themselves as Muslims? The time that this was written, at least 3,500 members of the armed forces. Do Americans know that these same Muslims would turn their guns against their fellow Americans, military men and women in the same tents, and kill them in the name of Islam? What is America thinking? What is America thinking? More alarming is a well-funded organization planning to subvert this nation to Islamic law from within. How? By using politics, the legal system, and the liberal media. As early as 1993, CAIRS, C-A-I-R-S, President Spokesperson and National Communications Director, said, "I wouldn't want to create the impression that I wouldn't like the government of the United States to be Islamic sometime in the future. But I'm not going to do anything violent to promote that. I'm going to do it through education." And they are using that as well. There's just so many. The political correctness toward Islam that we see in America it's like giving them a free hall pass to go anywhere they want in the United States and to not say anything. Terms like Islamophobia and being afraid of them. Where is the understanding? It's obvious that this is a spiritual battle. It's obvious that what we're talking about is really war between Satan and God. Fortunately, we know who wins. We've got the end of the book, and that tells the truth. And all the lies in the world are expelled by truth. You know, lies are called darkness, but truth is light. And light will always dispel darkness. Try it sometime. Go into a completely dark room and turn a light on. See what happens. The darkness goes so fast you can hardly see it go. Right? Light is what was, and truth is what will defeat the lies. There's a lot more there, but I don't really have time to get into that right now. Maybe another time. Islam. I'm going to just do this kind of quickly. We've got about 15 minutes, and during this 15 minutes, I want to tell you just a little bit about Islam, the religion. It's all about Allah. The constant conflict in the Middle East arises because of the hatred between Muslims and Jews. It's not all about politics. Much of it has to do with religious perspectives. 9/11 really piqued our interest in the Muslims in America. Americans are the targets of a holy war. Militant Muslims referred to as infidels, refer to us as infidels who must be wiped off the face of the earth in accordance with the teachings of Muhammad. But I want to give you a quick look at Islam. It's the second largest of the world religions. More than 1 billion Muslims. You may not know this. It's only 1,400 years old. It's the youngest of the major world religions. Presence in the U.S. began in the mid to late 1800s. When do you think the first mosque was put up in the United States? Guess. When? What? 1934. 1934, the first mosque was put up, even though their presence was there from the late 1800s. And guess where the first mosque was? You'd never guess in a million years. Somebody said New York City. That's what I would have guessed. No. What? No. No, I said you'd never guess. I don't know why you're trying. I just told you you'd never guess. No. No. Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Would you have ever gotten it? No. Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The first mosque in 1934. And there's a religious requirement, to pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in a lifetime. And more than 2 million visit Mecca annually in the 12th month of the Muslim year. Okay, Muhammad, they do not call themselves, they don't call their religion Mohammedanism because Muhammad isn't who they worship. They do not believe in worshiping Muhammad. Muhammad's a prophet, and they worship Allah. But Muhammad, you need to know about him because he's the first prophet. He was born in AD 570 in Saudi Arabia, which is where Mecca is located. His father died before he was born, so the family business crumbled. His mother died when he was 6. Muhammad was sent to live with his grandfather, who died shortly afterwards. So he moved in with his uncle, who was the head of the Quraysh clan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's Quraish. This clan had the responsibility of the Kaaba, which was a Meccan shrine in Arabia. Most of the residents of Mecca worshiped numerous gods and natural phenomena such as trees and rocks. Muhammad couldn't read or write, but he had a knack for commerce. This is very short. At age 25, he married a 40-year-old woman who owned the caravan business that he was managing. And he was disillusioned by the polytheistic practices around him. And he often sought solitude in a cave outside of Mecca. So how did the religion begin? In this cave, he had a vision that changed his life and the world. This was in AD 610. He was 40 years old, same age as Moses when he started in the wilderness. Muhammad believed Gabriel delivered the message. And the message is there's only one true God, and his name is Allah, and that idolatry is an abomination. 2 years later, in AD 612, he began to preach and gain converts. He continued to receive revelations, and his disciples all wrote his revelations down. A Muslim is someone who submits to the will of Allah by the practice of Islam in daily life, the 5 pillars. I'll talk about those. If I don't get to them now, I'll get to them the next time I speak. Mu'min is somebody who intellectually accepts the Islamic faith. And as I said, Mohammedanism, Muslims reject this term because their faith is in Allah, and Muhammad is not to be worshipped. I want to just mention the 5 doctrines. You need to see the difference between Islam and Christianity. Their doctrine about God, there's only one, and his name is Allah. God is greater than everything. It has the same power as the God of Judaism and Christianity. He's omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, but that's the end of any similarity. Muslims have 99 names for Allah, and love is not a defining characteristic of Allah. More judgment than grace, more power than mercy. Allah doesn't love the one whose bad deeds outweigh the good. Doesn't love them. God of the Bible loves all, and none are basically good. Allah cannot be comprehended. Paul prays that we will be able to comprehend our God. Humans can never know Allah. They can know about him, but they cannot have a personal experiential knowledge of him. They don't have a personal relationship with their God. Allah doesn't reveal himself. He reveals his mashi'at. That means his desires and wishes. For the Muslim, Allah remains mysterious, distant, and unapproachable. Now, all of his writings were collected in a book that's called the Quran. It's normally spelled Q-U-R''A-N, but now it's being spelled more often as K-O-R-A-N. But the word Quran means reading. It contains 114 surahs, which are chapters. So how big is this Quran? It's only 4/5 the length of the New Testament. That's it. A common trait of monotheistic religions is that idolatrous and immoral people take offenses at the teaching of a holy and moral God. In 622, he and his small band of followers had to flee north to the city now known as Medina, the city of the prophet. Medina had several tribal groups who were fighting. Muhammad formed a small army and began establishing peace. For 6 years they fought. That's, by the way, how they established peace. In AD 630, Muhammad and his forces conquered Mecca and destroyed every idol and every shrine except Kaaba, which became the most sacred place on earth to Muslims. He extended his control over most of Arabia by treaty or force, and he was a combined religious leader and ruler who enforced the worship of Allah. He died in June of AD 632. His followers carried the faith across Asia, Africa, and into Europe. Islam is an Arabic term meaning submission to one God, Allah. The root word means peace, much like the Hebrew word shalom. So it's peace which comes from submitting to the will of God. As far as the Trinity is concerned, Muslims don't believe in the Trinity and believe that Christians worship three gods. So that's a synopsis of their number one doctrine on God. Number two doctrine is on angels. They believe in the hierarchy of created beings, animals, humans, angels. There are good angels and bad angels. Good angels are the messengers of Allah. Gabriel is the head angel. Bad angels are led by Shaitan, probably Satan, and his fellow bad angels are called jinns or demons. Each human has two recording angels who keep track of all the good and bad deeds. This is really where they do that balance thing that isn't in Christianity, but a huge percentage of Christians think it is, that we weigh our good against our bad, and if the good wins out, we get to go to heaven, and if the bad wins out, we don't. Well, they believe that that really happens, and if somebody's bad outweighs the good, they're not even loved by Allah. Doctrine number 3, sacred scriptures. They read the Torah, 5 books of Moses. The amazing thing, it looks like the opposite of Christianity, because Christianity and Judaism is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it appears that Islam is the God of Ishmael and all the descendants of Ishmael. They also read the Zabur, which is the Psalms of David, the Injil, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ. They don't believe he's God. The Quran, which is Muhammad's revelation. So those are the 4 sacred scriptures that they look at. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, the gospel of Jesus, and Muhammad's revelations. Because the Quran was the final message of Allah to his people, it supersedes all previous revelations. If anything in those 3 books that we read are different from what their revelations in the Quran, they go by the Quran. About the Quran, a lot of information that's already in the Bible. None of the 20 prophets are mentioned, including Abraham, Moses, or Jesus. Much is consistent with the Bible. Islam teaches that the Torah and the Injil were misinterpreted and corrupted by Jews and Christians. The Quran, however, is believed to have been preserved in its original perfect state. And the fourth doctrine, there's 5 here I'm going to cover before we close here. The doctrine number 4 is on prophets. Muslims believe that over 100,000 prophets have been sent to human beings. The Quran lists fewer than 30, which include Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, Solomon, Jonah, John the Baptist, and Jesus. Jesus is not viewed as the Son of God. However, he was viewed, interestingly, as sinless, whereas even Muhammad was not. He was born of a virgin, but definitely not God. They respect and honor Jesus, but consider him to be of less significance than Muhammad. Okay, that's on prophets. And the 5th doctrine was on future judgment. They believe in an afterlife. They believe in the resurrection of the dead. After that, there will be a great day of judgment, and the 2 angels will review their database. Actions are weighed on a scale of absolute justice by Allah. Eternal destiny will be heaven or eternal suffering. One loophole, very important one: die as a martyr in defense of the Islamic faith or in a holy war, jihad, and you go directly to heaven. Don't even have to worry about the scales. There's so much more. We need to talk about the 5 pillars and different things, but our time is up for today. And next week, we're going to have a biblical study brought to us by David and Nancy Riley. And we don't want to miss that. And if you know somebody that might be interested in what's going to be going on here, we have Pastor Bill coming on too, and he knows some people in the Twin Cities that are very much involved with the community of Somalis and Christians, right? Christian Somalis. And we're going to hopefully be able to get him some information from him as well, and to come and speak. Tell people, if you see anything, put something on Facebook about this, any social media you can find, and like it, and have it, and ask everybody else to like it. A lot of us don't understand how that works, but if you like something, that opens it up to all of your people, and everybody that likes it opens it up to all of theirs. So it gets much bigger, and a lot more people see it if you like things. So whenever you see something from JP, just make a point to like it. That will help us. Okay? I think this is going to be an exciting thing. I'm sorry I kind of rushed. I was probably trying to like drinking from a fire hydrant today. But we'll go back over, this is just kind of an introduction. We'll go back over a lot of this. We're going to also, there's some other videos that we want you to see.